Fellowship of the Broken, Making Sense of 12-Step Recovery by Angelo. Chapter 44, Step 12. Quote, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Close quote. Step 12 is the spiritual practice of self-forgetting. The step is in two distinct but related parts. The first part concerns carrying the message of recovery to other addicts. The second part relates to practicing spiritual principles in our daily lives outside of 12-step fellowship. Both of these elements are important and necessary for effective recovery. We should take one final look at the precise wording of the steps in order to draw out the exact meaning. The words having had are past tense and imply that something has already happened. The words spiritual awakening specifically describe the awakening of consciousness, awareness, knowingness, universal mind, spirit, or being in the individual. The term spiritual awakening has the same meaning as other phrases such as self-realization, self-revelation, unveiling, vital spiritual experience, psychic change, shift, transcendence, ascension, transformation, metamorphosis, resurrection, rebirth, second coming, or salvation. The words the result imply a specific outcome or consequence. The words these steps obviously apply to the previous 11 steps. The word tried means made an attempt or effort to do something. The words this message unquestionably refer to the earlier part of the sentence, which clearly states that a spiritual awakening has taken place as a consequence of these 11 steps. The word and means in addition or as well. The word practice in this context means the actual application of ideas and methods as opposed to theoretical understanding. The words these principles relate to the behaviors and attitudes that are fundamental to the first 11 steps. The word all means the whole extent or quantity and without exception. And the word affairs relates to the various activities that comprise our day-to-day lives. As with all of the steps, the wording of step 12 is in the style of describing what others have done in order to bring about recovery from addiction. This is what they did after having had a spiritual awakening. It is included as a 12th step precisely because self-forgetting is an essential practice in becoming yet more established in and as non-personal consciousness. The wording of step 12 is very clear. We will have had some sort of spiritual awakening as the result of the first 11 steps. We are to make an effort to carry this message of spiritual awakening to other addicts. We do this because we now know that it works, and as addicts ourselves, we are in a unique position to share our individual experience, strength, and hope. In addition, we are to apply the behaviors and attitudes contained in the steps to every single aspect of our daily lives, without exception. Spiritual awakening is a unique individual experience. There is no standard against which we should be seeking to measure ourselves. Some do have a sudden dramatic revelation that instantly changes the course of their lives. Descriptions sometimes include bright lights or a tremendous feeling of serenity and presence. For the rest of us, it's more often the case of a gradual awakening, punctuated by moments of understanding and clarity that are sometimes followed by periods of doubt or depression. This is all par for the course. Even those of us who do have a sudden spiritual awakening, there is still the necessity for continuing self-awareness, self-contemplation, and self-forgetting. Otherwise, there is the inevitable return to identification with the personal ego self. There's also the risk that such a dramatic happening will be perceived as a personal experience and hence reinforce the sense of personal self. Spiritual awakening is not a personal experience. It is the temporary absence of the personal ego self that allows the revelation of non-personal consciousness. There can be no pride in a spiritual awakening, because pride only exists as an aspect of the personal self that is now absent. This is all rather ironic and easily misunderstood. Whether a spiritual awakening is sudden or gradual makes no difference to the overall process. A caterpillar may get a temporary glimpse of the potential life as a butterfly, but it still needs to go through the process of metamorphosis. There are no shortcuts, and all attempts to artificially speed up the process will be futile. All we can do is remain focused on the suggested actions and allow the process to unfold in its own time. The eventual transformation is inevitable, because non-personal consciousness has been our underlying true nature all along. It may not happen until physical death, but it will happen. Our opportunity is to wake up to our true nature whilst we are still alive. We all have the chance to die to our personal ego self before we die physically. Carrying the message of spiritual awakening, and hence recovery, to other addicts is an act of self-forgetting. Our own previous burden of suffering in active addiction now turns into treasure to be shared with others. We do not do this selfishly in order to protect our own recovery. We do this selflessly, and often with a degree of personal inconvenience, precisely because this is the most effective way to practice self-forgetting. It's most effective because an addict in recovery is best placed to carry the message. Experience is far more valuable than any amount of instruction, advice, or doctrine. An addict in recovery is the most potent channel or instrument for the revelation of consciousness in other addicts. The fact that this further enhances the shift in identity for the one practicing step 12 is a byproduct of this activity rather than the purpose. If we are helping others in order to help ourselves, then we have fundamentally missed the whole point of recovery. The personal self who is trying to help their own recovery by doing this is supposed to have been surrendered by this stage. Step 12 is about self-forgetting, not self-development. We can be at our most useful when helping other addicts, but we also have an important role to play outside of 12-step fellowship. Simply being an expression of non-personal consciousness in our day-to-day lives will have a vibrational impact on all those with whom we come into contact. It's not so much about what we say, but the whole manner of how we react and behave. The qualities of consciousness expressed through us will resonate with the same qualities of consciousness that are the underlying reality of all humans and other sentient beings. All that is needed is to be present and to be our authentic, individual, non-personal selves. To be or not to be. To be an authentic expression of consciousness, or to be the inauthentic, limited, self-centered, fearful, personal ego self. Self-forgetting is about being the being. There is another important aspect to this second part of Step 12. I mentioned in Step 11 that selfish prayer can actually be counterproductive and keep us identified as a personal self. Likewise, if we practice spiritual principles within 12-step fellowship, but then return to being a personal ego self in our daily lives, then we are actually undermining our spiritual progress and hence our recovery. And we are also preventing the individual body and mind from being an effective instrument of consciousness. We will constantly yo-yo between feeling the positive qualities of consciousness within 12-step meetings and suffering the traits of the personal ego mind in all other areas of our lives. This understanding explains why we often continue to struggle in our lives despite being sober and in long-term recovery. We can very easily undo all of our spiritual progress by behaving selfishly in our careers, our families, or in our lives in general. The whole point of self-forgetting is to forget about the personal self. This is not a part-time activity. We may think that we have pulled the ripcord, but actually we have only pulled it part way out, and the parachute is not yet deployed. The Big Book devotes an entire chapter to Step 12 and offers detailed suggestions on how best to carry the message of recovery to those who still suffer from addiction. The practical experience of the early pioneers of 12-step recovery was that this focus on helping others worked even when other spiritual practices did not. Self-forgetting is a powerful spiritual practice. And we've seen that the spiritual journey is all about surrendering the personal ego self in favour of non-personal consciousness. All spiritual practices work to achieve this transformation, but self-forgetting is perhaps the most practical and effective practice because we literally forget about ourselves. The more we do this, the better. There are many ways in which we can be of service in helping to carry the message of recovery. We can honestly share our experience in 12-step meetings. We can offer practical help to those in early recovery. We can speak at other groups and share our story. We can volunteer for the various service positions within the individual groups or at intergroup, regional or national levels. We can volunteer for telephone service. We can sponsor others through the 12-step program. We can advise friends or family members who are struggling with addiction. We can do all of these things, some of these things, or anything else to be of service. The important thing is to forget about ourselves. The essay on Step 12 in 12 Steps and 12 Traditions is by far the longest chapter in the book. As well as covering various ways in which we can help to carry the message of recovery within 12-step fellowship, there is also discussion of how spiritual principles can be beneficial and helpful in the many different aspects of our lives. The third paragraph in the chapter describes some common factors of individual spiritual awakenings. Included in this paragraph is a sentence that reads, quote, "He has been granted a gift." which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being." Close quote. Well, this state of consciousness and being may seem to be a gift from the perspective of the personal ego self, but in reality it's not new. This state of consciousness, awareness, knowingness, universal mind, spirit, or being is our true nature and always has been. It is over-identification with the personal ego self that has obscured our underlying true nature all along. The real gift has been the circumstances of our lives that have brought us to the point of personal surrender. The word grace means favour, kindness, benefaction, or beneficence. In this respect, addiction can be seen as grace. It may seem strange to be grateful for addiction, but there's no doubt that addiction can lead us from hell to heaven. A literal understanding of step 12 would be that we are sober and in recovery, and that we try to help other addicts to do the same. And we also take the principles of recovery into other aspects of our lives. My observation is that even this rudimentary understanding of step 12 is often not always followed. A deeper understanding would be that we have indeed had some sort of psychic change as the result of staying sober and working through the steps with a sponsor. There is gratitude for recovery and a feeling that we should give something back by being of service in some way. We also listen and learn in 12-step meetings and combine this understanding with advice from our sponsor and the principles of the steps to live our lives on a different basis. The next level of understanding would be that spiritual awakening is an ongoing process of transformation. Working through the first 11 steps has been a good grounding, but there is no end to the possibilities. The stick of addiction is still present, but it's now the carrot of purpose and usefulness that dominates our motivation. We feel that we are now in the flow of life rather than fighting against it. Wherever we may be in our recovery, we remain committed to self-awareness, self-contemplation, and particularly to self-forgetting. The qualities of consciousness become a way of life, both within 12-step fellowship and in all other areas of our lives. Recovery is no longer a separate activity, but increasingly becomes integral. The deepest understanding of step 12 is in line with the St. Francis of Assisi prayer. The personal ego self is still present, but the true self is recognized as non-personal consciousness. There is a constant focus on the individual behaving as an instrument of consciousness rather than as a self-centered person. The more this is practiced, the more deeply we naturally abide in consciousness, and the more authentic we become as an expression of consciousness. The underlying state of consciousness is eternal happiness, peace, love, and unity. This increasingly becomes the state that we experience. The parachute is now fully open, and we can enjoy the ride. The butterfly is experiencing the same world in a completely different way and is blessed with freedom. The prodigal son has returned home and finds all that he ever desired. The previous experience of hell is seen as an illusion and a necessary part of the journey. The kingdom of heaven is found within. All that remains is to be who we truly are and to move in accordance with the will of consciousness. Steps 11 and 12 have been the core of my recovery. Step 11 continues to enhance my understanding and experience, and Step 12 has become increasingly meaningful as time has gone on. I've been in service within 12-Step Fellowship right from the start and feel a keen sense of purpose and usefulness. I've had the privilege of sponsoring others through the 12-Step program and have witnessed wonderful transformations in life circumstances and experiences. The qualities of consciousness have risen to the surface and generally express themselves freely, except when I make the mistake of taking things personally. There is no end to the depth of consciousness, and hence there is no limit to the potential for this life. I have recovered from the hopeless state of body and mind that was active addiction, yet at the same time I will be forever recovering. 12-step recovery is literally taking me from beer to eternity. My predominant feeling is one of gratitude, whatever the circumstances of my life may be in any given moment.